Well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad today is finally here and to see all of you. It has been quite a year or two of planning. I am Holly Snyder, the Outreach Committee Chair with the Society. Welcome to the Goleta Cemetery District and the Santa Barbara County Genealogical Society's 5th Picnic in the Cemetery event. Today we will meet 6 cemetery residents, but we're gonna hear a little bit about the cemetery first. I thought it was really interesting and I thought you would like it too. So where is Rick?
Today you're going to meet 7 cemetery residents. I live here. Why is it Holly and I are the only ones that don't have name tags? Okay. My name is Rick. Thank you for coming to our cemetery. Thank you. Beautiful day. I hope it rains though. Be nice. We can sure use it. Again, my name is Rick. I am honored to, for almost 17 years now, I wear a couple of hats for the cemetery. I am the administrator of the Goleta Cemetery District, which goes from El Cap to about Alomar, the ocean, to the National Forest. And we are a taxing authority, and so I administer that operation. I am also the general manager of the cemetery, where we're standing right now. And probably the most interesting hat I wear, I am the resident caretaker. I live here. My wife and I live here. House is right over there. So I keep an eye on things 24/7, and talk about historic, I may be the only one left that lives in a general manager that lives in the cemetery. I don't think I'm quite as extinct as lighthouse keepers, but almost. Anyway, Holly asked me to talk a little bit about the history, and it is going to be a little bit because I don't know a whole lot, to be honest with you. I have a tendency to spend my time doing historical things, updating individuals buried here. I like to do that. I like when I learn information about individuals, I like to update that and research that. But as far as the history of the grounds, I don't know a lot, but I will share with you what I do know. And usually if I'm talking to one person, I don't have to have notes, but I got 100 eyes looking at me, so I have notes. I tendency to forget things. When I came to work here, I was told there were burials here up on the hill here back to the 1850s. We have no record. By record, I mean a name and a location. We have no records that go back that far, but we do have some mention of some of our logbooks. The earliest recorded interment or burial here is again right up on that hill. Let me get my notes here. A 2-year-old boy, Harry Kimber. He was born in 1869. No, he was born in 1867 and he died in 1869. I've got a name and a location and a date. That's the first one that we have that information. So, back to the cemetery itself. Again, people were being buried on this hill as early as the 1850s. It wasn't a cemetery then. It was a piece of property owned by a Mr. William C. Marcy, and he is buried here. He had 3 acres, about 3.5 acres right up there. I don't know whether he was doing it. I don't know who was actually doing the burials, but it was owned by him. But let me get my notes here. In 1874, somebody, I don't know who, somebody started the wheels turning, and the Rafaela, I may be pronouncing that wrong, Cemetery Association was organized in early 1874. Mr. Marcy, donated the 3 acres to the Cemetery Association. I don't think it had any employees. I don't see of any record, but anyway, so from 1874 until early 1910. Now, early 1910, Mr. Elwood Cooper started the wheels turning to form an independent special district, an independent cemetery district. That was in early 1910, and he started a petition. I have a copy of that petition. It was signed by 153, all men, of course, men, him and 152 other, and it was submitted to the county for formation of an independent cemetery district. And reading over the old petition and the old documents, it was deemed to be a majority of the qualified electors. So in that district, in this section, 153 people, 153 men, was deemed a majority of the qualified electors, and the independent cemetery district was established on April 4th, 1910. It's the earliest, by far, of the 7 cemetery districts in Santa Barbara County. It's one of the earliest special districts of any special district in the county. And at that time, it was called the Goleta Public Cemetery District. The original board members were E.A. Hollister, A.M. Hole, and F.R. Simpson, all men, of course. In fact, all of the board members through all of the years since then have all been men, except now we have one female board member now, Claudia Chiden. She's still a board member here. Took a long time. So anyway, that was in 1910. Some point between now, a few years later, for some reason they changed the name to the Goleta Valley Cemetery District. I have no idea when that happened. I don't know how it happened, but it was changed. And then shortly after that, it was changed to the Goleta Cemetery District. That's where we are right now. And let me go through some of my notes here. And the cemetery, like I said, that was the original cemetery up there. Then it kind of expanded in little tiny pieces. It expanded that way, then it expanded that way, and then back in I think in the 80s when we bought that land from the county over there. All that land you see over there, that belongs to the cemetery. That was back in the 80s, I believe. We have currently, I have records of, as of last week, 11,186 burials here in the cemetery. We have pretty good records of all of those, although I'm always looking to improve on some of these older ones here. Kind of spotty records. Let me look through some of my notes here. One thing I like to mention, because I actually did research this, over there where our Veterans Monument is, over there by the flag, I always wonder, I don't know, you got to go over and see it. It's really a pretty monument dedicated to World War I and World War II local residents killed in action. I have no information on where that came from. I don't know where it came from. So I put that question out to some of the veterans groups, and I did get back. It was, the Veterans Monument was donated by Mr. John Troop. He's buried up over there, whose son was killed in World War II. And it was originally at the Goleta Union, the Goleta Union School building down on Hollister, and later the Goleta Community Center. But they, back in I think it was the 70s, they donated it to the cemetery, and it was moved from there, the Goleta school building, and it used to be right up there on the top of that hill. That's where the flag used to be and the monument used to be. And then when they bought that, when they expanded, then it was moved over there. So it used to be right up there on top of that hill. So I was glad to get some information on that. And let me see, told you about that. Okay. The district has expanded over the years. It was originally, I think that's why it was called the Raphael Cemetery Association. Originally, it was the same boundaries of the Raphael School District. I don't even know if that exists anymore. But it was the same boundaries, but it's expanded over the years, and it's not going to get any bigger. I think that's all I have for now. Do we have any questions? Almost afraid.
Can anybody be buried here, or do you have to be from the second district?
You have to be a resident of the Goleta Cemetery District or related. You can be related. You can live on the moon, and if you're related to somebody buried here, then you can be buried here. You have to pay more though, because see, the property owners in the district every year they pay money to the cemetery. That's why our fees are relatively low. So if you are related, if you have a connection, you can be. You have to just pay extra.
How many more can you handle, and where is it expanding?
It's expanding around the corner. You can't really see it from here.
Baseball field?
It's on this side of the baseball field,
This side of the-
all the way around. In that section, see, we have about 16 acres under grass. 16 under grass. There's room over there where we are burying people now, probably for another 30 or 40 years. Yeah, it's kind of at the rate we're doing now. We're burying more and more, we're doing more and more cremations now than casket. Some days the traditional casket burials may be a thing of the past.
And is there any way you can still get a monument, or does it have to be flat?
In the newer sections, it's got to be flat. If for some reason there's still families who own burial plots in these old sections here.
Yeah.
And if they use it, they can put one of these. It's all grandfathered in, but in our new, see if you look out over there, they're all flat.
I know.
Yeah.
My mother's over there. And is it just because of the lawn mowing is easier? Is that why you do it?
Maintenance and irrigation.
That's the only
It's,
reason.
it's the only reason. It's so much easier.
Thank you.
So much easier. Just says, and oh, you're welcome. And please, I put my manager's hat on. Be careful as you walk around. There's not a level piece of turf in this entire cemetery. So just be careful as you walk around. Thank you.
So now we're going to get ready to go see our cemetery residents. And there's just a few logistics to go over before you get into groups and head over. And also one thing, I got reminded that if you're interested in knowing who is here in the cemetery, the Genealogical Society does have a listing of the cemetery on their website in their digital collections. And it's pretty long index.
Here lies William and Ann Hendry.
My name is William Nicole Hendry. I was born the 17th of February, 1850 in Aboyne, Scotland. It's a small town along the River Dee, just at the edge of the Scottish Highlands. My middle name, Nicole, honors the heritage of my mother's family name. For 22 years, I lived in the town, and it was expected I would continue there as my father had and his father before him. But then we received news that a man in the United States, in California, was seeking workers, Scottish men, to work his lands. And we wondered to ourselves, what kind of men did they have in California, or rather a lack of men that would call for a laird to send halfway around the world to bring workers to his farm. Well, 6 of us answered the call, myself, John Rutherford, William Begg, John McLaren, Jim Milne, and John McKay. And so on the 1st of December of 1872, we left Liverpool, England for New York City. It was 3 weeks at sea, and the first week I was terribly seasick, but I finally got my sea legs and things went well after that. We landed in New York City on December 23rd, and we spent our first Christmas and did the best we could away from home and away from family. On New Year's Day, we boarded another ship to take us down to Panama. It was a very rough going because there was 100 of us crammed into steerage. But I took the occasion to break out my fiddle, go to the upper deck to play for the passengers upstairs, but better yet, to get some fresh air. Upon landing in Panama, we boarded a train and headed for the Pacific coast, 5 hours away. 3 weeks to cross an entire ocean and 5 hours to cross from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Now, I had left Scotland in the dead of winter, and the sights along the way through Panama I can never forget. In the dead of winter, the color, the fragrance, the birds, the plants, everything in full bloom and in full color. It was quite the journey along there. Arriving in Panama City, we then boarded another ship and took us up to San Diego, where we landed at the end of January. We were so happy to finally be close to home. One of our members broke out his bagpipes. You've never seen the looks on faces of people who have never heard a bagpipe and seen a good Scotsman dance. We were met by our new boss, Mr. Elwood Cooper, who had sent for us, and we left San Diego and headed to Santa Barbara. I arrived here on February 6th, and 2 days later, I was to work. Mr. Cooper's ranch covered 2,000 acres, and every inch of it was planted or growing with some crop or some experiment. There was almonds, there was walnuts, there was citrus, there was produce, and there was enough to keep a young man busy. I was either plowing or building fences, mending fences, building roads, repairing roads, planting and harvesting. In Scotland, we just had one chance at it. You planted, you nurtured, you harvested, and hoped you had enough to get you through the winter. In California, the land never slumbers. It's in bloom and producing all year long. Well, soon I found myself wanting to get more money, and the opportunity arose with the Kimberley Coal Company, run by Captain Martin Kimberley and John Stearns, the man who built our wharf. Now, you may wonder about that because there's not much coal in Santa Barbara, but this coal was to be found up in Alaska, a small island in the Aleutians, and so that's where I went, again accompanied by two of my friends, Mr. Rutherford and Mr. Begg. Well, we had been told that an able-bodied man could gather 3 tons of coal a day by hand with no problem. Of course, upon arrival, that was not what we found. It was very difficult, but we built a railroad, we built a wharf, and we did mining for nearly a year. I finally came back to Santa Barbara in 1878 and went to work for Mr. Sherman P. Stowe on his property. Now, all this time I was a bachelor, but that was about to change with the arrival of the Stronach family down in Carpinteria. It wasn't so much the Stronach family, it was their beautiful daughter, Anne, that caught my eye and my heart. Turns out she was from Banffshire, just 60 miles from where I grew up. 60 miles apart, but it took 3,000 miles to bring us together.
February 11, 1881. Dear friends and family, I am now settled in my new country, and I know we shall never meet again in this world, but I am sure that we will be together again on the other side someday, but not too soon, I hope. My family and I are now settled in California, in a city named Santa Barbara, on the west coast of the country, about as far from Scotland as one can get. But Scotland and you all will always be close to my heart. I promise to write to you, and I look forward to receiving letters from my old home place. I'm sure you have noticed that I am writing this letter on my birthday. I will try to do this every year, time permitting, but I cannot promise. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1884. Dear friends and family, I am sorry that I have not written sooner, but the days and the years have passed by so quickly. I have much news to tell you. Good news. I met a wonderful Scotsman. His name is William Nicol Hendry, a farmer from Scotland. How could I marry anyone but a Scotsman? He is tall and strong. We married last year. I know we will be happy together, and we have already begun a family. Our first child, a daughter, was born this year. We named her Annie. I hope you are well, and please write when you have time. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1894. Dear friends and family, how quickly the years slide by, and how quickly the stork delivers babies to us. We have been blessed with 6 more children since my last letter. William, named for his dad, was born in 1885, then Nicole in 1887, and then John in 1888. Then came Harry, son number 4, Lottie, daughter number 2, and Fred, son number 5, who was born just this year. Fortunately, the older children helped me care for the little ones. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1889. Dear friends and family, since my last letter, our family has increased by 2 more sons, Frank and Alan, my 6th and 7th sons. Although I have lost my first child, Anne, or perhaps I should say, I have gained a son-in-law. It seems like only yesterday when she was a babe in my arms. I hope this letter finds you all in good health. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1903. Dear friends and family, I was blessed with another addition to our family. Margaret, my third daughter, was born a couple of years ago. I don't know how long the Lord will continue to bless me with babies, but I love them all. You know how it is. This year, Frank, Johnny, Fred, and Lottie took part in the recital at the end of the school year. I was so proud of them. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1907. Dear friends and family, well, our children are finally becoming productive young adults. Our son William has been apprenticed to a local blacksmith in Santa Barbara for a couple of years. And recently, when the shop owner moved away, William took over the business. And some of his brothers will be joining him when they are old enough. I am so proud of them. And speaking of children, I have added 2 more to our family. My 8th son, Walter George, was born a few years ago and was followed by Robert Bruce, my 9th son. I look forward to reading your letters and hearing about your families as well. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1911. Dear friends and family, well, I have not seen the stork at all since my last letter to you. So my final count of children is 12, 9 boys and 3 girls. They certainly keep me busy, but I wouldn't trade any of them for a sack of gold. 3 more of my babies walked to the altar recently. William married, Harry married, as did Lottie. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1920. Dear friends and family, Margaret graduated from Santa Barbara High School, and Nicole married a lovely young Scottish woman. We all survived the Spanish flu, although it was difficult to wear masks and stay home for so many months. Everything was closed, the schools, the library, the cinemas, the stores. The younger children were still in high school, so they got their school assignments in the mail and sent them back the same way. Fortunately, the local record store would deliver phonograph records on approval and then pick them up the next day. That way, we could listen to a new melody overnight. I think one of the reasons that we did not succumb to the flu is that I kept everyone healthy with regular elimination. I gave my children a daily dose of cod liver oil or Veronica Springs water. They could choose which one, but the result was the same. The big news this year, however, is that we have moved from the farm. We moved to a comfortable home in the city. We will miss our life on the farm where we made a living and raised our children. But William and I are not getting any younger, and we were ready to move on. Yours forever, Annie. February 11, 1940. Dear friends and family, I still enjoy your letters, even though I am writing fewer as I get older. 3 more of my children have made their trip to the altar: Robert Bruce, William, and Margaret. My dear husband left this earthly realm back in 1924. I do not know how much longer I will be on this earth, but I do know that when it is my time, I will be buried in the Goleta Cemetery, together with my beloved William. Yours forever, Annie.
All the Hendry children that we've had, there's one more Hendry name that was added to the Santa Barbara history. And that happened just after the turn of the century. Ann and I had the opportunity to pick up a parcel of land just to the edge of the Hope Ranch, along the old Las Positas Ranch, along the Royal Burrow Creek, and below the Veronica Springs. It was wonderful land, very rich, lots of water, but it also had a small beach at the far end of the creek. Now, no one ever went there because there was no reason to. There's plenty of beaches, but as the cliff drive was extended to take people to the Veronica Springs facility, and then continued as the Hope Rancho started to open up for development and for the Potter Country Club, more and more people passed us on their way to the scenic roads, as they called it, back into the ranch. And so the beach took on the name because it passed through our property. It became known as the Hendry's Beach, the name which has kept on ever since.
Here lies Joseph Sexton.
My name is Joseph Sexton, and I was born 1842. My father, Richard, he owned nurseries in California, and I kind of grew up in the business. Horticulture, you know, it might have been my only real skill, but I was good at it. You know, my parents, they moved to Santa Barbara in 1867, and that year I helped them open a nursery right down there on Montecito and Castillo Street, you know, down near the harbor. In 1868, I bought 129 acres of land right down there just west of here on Hollister. Now, La Patera, it was then Goleta at the time, was a young farming community. You know, 9 miles of bad road west of Santa Barbara. And that stagecoach ride to come out to here was, well, it'd give you the willies. You know, once a wildcat, it jumped through the open window, landed on some poor unfortunate galoot, and, well, he killed it, but sure left some awful scars. Now, when I bought the land, my neighbors, they were serious about getting into commercial farming. So a year later, I opened my own nursery. And the locals, they thought it was a cockamamie idea because there's droughts, there's floods, there's dust and wind, there's hopper grasses, there's birds, there's ants. It was no cinch. But I did get my money back and more. You know, within 5 years, I showed that every tree, flower, vegetable, and fruit that I planted had done well. The nursery idea turned out to be a real corker. So, in 1869, that was a very busy year for me. You know, I opened the nursery, I built a house, and I married Lucy Ann Foster. I was 27 and she was 16. Oh, now don't go judging me. It was 1869. And besides, there is a handwritten note written on our marriage certificate that says that her father approved. Besides, we got married at her parents' place just over there on Patterson and Hollister. Now, being a pioneer horticulturalist and a good businessman, I helped transform Southern California's vast cattle ranchos into, well, into commercial farms and ornamental gardens. You know, my nursery was every much a laboratory as it was a supply station. I imported plants and exotic trees from Europe and Asia and South America, Australia, and Hawaii. Now, commercial farmers like Elwood Cooper, you know, came to rely on me. You know, old Coop and I, we served on the very first committee charged with selecting trees for public places in the city of Santa Barbara. Now, while I was building up the nursery, everything was just ducky between Lucy and I. By the time she was 26, we had 8 children. 9 years later, we welcomed our 12th and last child. I hired Santa Barbara's first professional architect to design us a home that was befitting our family size and prosperity. You know, I was no cheapskate. And don't you worry about Lucy, you know. She was happy and she lived to be 75. Now, our way of life in that home, it's recorded in the book called 14 at the Table. And amongst other things, it documents. It documents that we did not mollycoddle our children. No siree. Each one of them had their chores before and after school, and a chore they all participated in is dealing with the gophers. Yeah, they were a plague in our time too, and I happily paid a nickel bounty for every tail. Now Lucy, she instilled a love of literature in the children by reading the youth classics to them every night. So, in 1872, I think I'll go there next. 1872, I got me some Argentine pampas grass. It had been grown in the States for 25 years, but nobody paid much interest until I personally started a fashion craze. You know, I took a whole mess of these dried plumes and shipped them off to New York and London and Hamburg, and the la-dee-da crowd, why, they just snapped them up. I perfected the drying method, and my eldest son, Charlie, he invented a husker to speed production, and we needed it too, because we shipped skadoodles of these things every year for over 2 decades. But in the late 1890s, the fad kind of died out, and probably just as well, because turns out dry grass, kind of a serious fire hazard. Now, we made time for fun too. I had a nifty dance hall and theater built just east of our home for, to provide social opportunities for the children. It was called Sexton Hall, a community center. A community center for dances and plays, elections and meetings, weddings and, well, funerals. And one of the saddest funerals was for my son Charlie. He died in a dynamite explosion while working on an oil rig in Carpinteria. You know, Charlie wanted to bring that oil rig here to Goleta because there was tantalizing evidence that there was oil underneath these fields, and there was, lots of it. Charlie just never had a chance to look for it. Now, in 1894, I turned my nursery, the whole shebang, over to my boys, and I bought myself an 8,000-acre cattle ranch, up there in Ventura County. And I worked that ranch every week for a whole bunch of years, skedaddling home every weekend to be with the family. When I was in my 60s, I retired from all my businesses and returned home to my first 2 loves, Lucy and plant propagation experiments. I died at home in 1917, and my funeral was the last community event at Sexton Hall. But 61 years later, our house, Sexton House, became a Santa Barbara historical landmark, county historical landmark. And they found the trash pits in our backyard. And those trash pits revealed scads of information about the way we lived. One, for instance, is apparently we subsisted largely on a diet of beef, mutton, and poultry. Curiously, no privy holes were found. Now, in 1987, the plans were approved, and in '89, the Sexton House was restored. It is now the centerpiece of the Pacifica Suites Hotel. And it's open to the public, even today. So get on the tube, call the Pacifica Suites Hotel, ask the front desk for viewing availability. Tell them Joseph sent you.
Here lies Miles Lane.
Not for us, not for us, my Lord, but to your name give the glory, faith, a willingness to serve you, my community, and my family. Why? Top of the morning to you. I'm Miles Hinton Lane, born 1810 in North Carolina and left this earthly form in 1888. Although life was fine in Ashton, Clark County, Missouri, California called. The land, the freedom to farm. So, at 53, Elizabeth and I got together our wagons, some fine oxen, 9 out of our 10 children and grandkids, and in 1863 across the plains we traveled. History says we were part of the Western movement inspired by the great Abraham Lincoln. I think that the wild lands of the country should be distributed so that every man should have the means and opportunity benefiting his condition. We took advantage of that adage and traveled during the height of the Civil War. Now, I'm not getting into politics here. I'm just painting a picture. This is my son Jasper, was a wordy one. Kid's a corker. Also the most accident prone of all my young'uns, and more on that later. He wrote a journal of our 5 months travels, and I'd like to share with you what he wrote the first 2 days of our momentous journey, beginning April 21st in 1863. For many years previous, it has been my earnest desire to perform a journey similar to the one now impending. Now I have the pleasure of announcing our departure from our residence upon that perilous journey. This evening we have hitched in and traveled 2.5 miles to my uncle's, where we will stay until the morning. It is the intention of our neighbors to gather together tonight at our house for the purpose of enjoying ourselves together once more in the ways of a social party, when we will again resume our journey. April 22nd. This morning, we hitched in and awaited the arrival of the remainder of our caravan, which presently came up. It now consists of 8 wagons, of which 4 are drawn by oxen, the remainder by horses and mules. After all, having arrived and decided upon the route to be traveled, we moved slowly off, with a great many of our friends and acquaintances accompanying us. We passed on about 3 miles and came to a small village, and here the most affecting scene I witnessed came to pass. Friends, mothers and children, brothers and sisters that have lived for years lived with peace, tranquility, and harmony existing between them, was forced to say farewell, and perhaps forever. Now, you need to understand that being married to a fine woman provides any man with the backbone that he needs to be that steward. And Elizabeth Ancrum McCoy honored me by saying yes. She was my rock, and some might say she was the true ground that held us together. And I was the dreamer. I had a vision. We were quite the team, and we created quite the brood. That handsome woman bore me 10 children. Woo, they were a handful. 5 boys and 5 girls, and with all of that, she kept us together. Our caravan arrived in Petaluma, California, September 26, 1863. But we didn't get to Goleta until 1868, where we encountered the prettiest parcel of land I ever did see. Bought 120 acres, 2 miles from town on the stage road near the schoolhouse on the right for $1 an acre. I saw the farm in my mind, and I felt it in my heart, and the work began. And boy, did we work. One year we harvested our corn, which yielded 50 bushels to the acre. Now, mind you, we did what was known as dry land farming, relying on precipitation and ground moisture. We didn't irrigate. And we had 14 acres of wheat, which gave us over 25 bushels to the acre. And my volunteer barley crop yielded 2 tons to the acre the 3rd year since the ground was plowed. The newspaper was so excited, and they said, and I quote, "What other country can show results in a way of a volunteer crop 3 years from the sowing of the seed and the plowing of that ground?" They found my information valuable and of great interest to the folks abroad. And we always found ways to take care of and be part of our community. Some say it was me, but it could have been my son Miles who invented the mechanical walnut huller. Pretty nifty if I say so myself. And then Jasper and Dexter, 2 of our grandkids, invented a portable picking ladder to help get crops from the tops of trees. We believed in sharing and helping our community, and any farmer that needed it, we would let them use our thresher. We were always watching out for each other in this town. Now, I said I wasn't going to mention politics, but in August of 1884, I was elected as one of 2 delegates in the Hope Ranch polling place for the Democratic primary election. And Jasper was delegate in La Patera. Speaking of which, that boy got himself into more shenanigans. One time, he had a narrow escape when one of his helpers threw him off balance while he was hoisting himself into his barn by means of a block and tackle. And he fell about 8 feet. But, as the paper said, he sustained no serious injuries. and one time, he was standing on a curb looking up at a windmill, and he got dizzy, and he fell into a well 32 feet deep. He was fished out by his wife without any serious damage to himself or the well. I'm not too worried about him, though. Anyone who can survive and write about traveling across the country is of strong stock. Now, before I let you go, I do have 2 more quips for your enjoyment, both of which happened after I left this earth. We were a large brood, as you know, and the land had to be divided. And well, that family of mine numbered the shares of the farmland, put the numbers on slips of paper, which were placed inside hollow walnut shells. Then the shells were glued together, and on January 16th, 1900, the start of the new century, my family met in solemn assembly and cracked the nutshells drawn by lot. And in this way, 10 heirs, aged 37 to 61, selected their inheritances. And our final achievement took place in 2002, on the 8th day of July, where it was passed, approved, and adopted by the Santa Barbara County Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission that the Lane family main farmhouse and cottage, barn, oak tree, and the landscape surrounding the 3 buildings became a place of historic merit. All of this because I had a hankering to move out west. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for being by my side, and thank the good Lord for the strength and the fortitude. Now you all, skedaddle.
Here lies Stella Haverland Rouse.
Good morning.
As she noted, my name is Stella Haverland Rouse. Thank you for visiting today. This peaceful cemetery has been my home since 1999. I'm here with my husband Clarence, my twin sister Della, my parents AJ and Edith, and grandparents, aunts and uncles behind me. They all came here from Indiana and Ohio in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There are actually quite a few Ohio transplants in the area. Mr. Sexton and Mr. Paulin both came from Ohio. And Mr. Paulin's brother Arthur was a friend of my mom's cousin Andrew Hole, who was a constable in Goleta and one of the first trustees of this cemetery. My father AJ came from a large farming family outside Cincinnati. He arrived in 1896 and went to work on local ranches. 5 years later, he went home and came home with a bride, my mother Edith Moore. In 1905, he started buying property at the southwest corner of San Marcos and Cathedral Oaks roads. He planted orchards of walnuts, lemons, avocados, persimmons, and other fruit. He sold to some of the local stores and the packing houses, and he was quite successful. In April 14, 1908, I was born on that ranch. Half an hour later, my sister Della arrived. The story goes that my mother wasn't sure what to name us, so she asked the doctor for ideas, and he gave her a list. We became Stella Ella and Della Bella. When we were girls, we went to the one-room Cathedral Oaks school across the road from us, and we loved reading and writing. In 6th grade, I won a county essay contest, and I was hooked. I wanted to be a writer when I grew up. I devoured any reading I could get my hands on, including the pieces of newspaper I used to wrap fruit when I was a teenager. We were good students, but in high school, typing was nearly our downfall. We figured it would be useful in the future, but it was hard. So we bought a typewriter so we could practice at home, and I spent an entire Christmas vacation catching up on assignments. We graduated from Santa Barbara High in 1925, spent 2 years at the Teachers College on the Riviera, got our English degrees from UCLA, and then spent a year at the library school at the LA Public Library. When we returned to Santa Barbara in 1931, I got a job at the Downtown Public Library, and Della became librarian for the William Wiles Lincoln Collection at the State College. She worked in the building that later became the Riviera Theater. In the 1930s, we wrote biographical sketches of California authors for a library journal. We got to interview people like Irving Stone, Isabel Field, and Edwin Corll, and we loved getting to know these interesting people. We even kept in touch with some of them. In 1940, I married Clarence Rouse, who worked at County National Bank. He had arrived in Santa Barbara from Missouri in 1919 at the age of 17. He had caught the flu during the 1918 pandemic, and of course his parents both got sick. His dad died 3 days later. So not sure what to do, he and his mother accepted an invitation from some cousins to join them here in Santa Barbara. In 1942, I helped establish the county medical library that was housed at Cottage Hospital and became its head librarian. But I had another project going on too. I was pregnant. So the library opened in June, and our daughter Shirley was born in December. Now that we were a family, Clarence and I bought a house just over the hill from Franceschi Park with 1.5 acres. We planted fruit trees, a vegetable garden, lots of flowers, and some rare trees and plants. I was no longer working, but I was busy raising Shirley and taking care of our home and yard. During the war, when there were flower shortages, I raised dahlias and made weekly flower arrangements for the bank. I even competed in some flower shows, and I won first prize for my most stunning arrangement. Clarence was in Kiwanis, and we always belonged to multiple organizations, so we were very busy with volunteer work. Shirley used to giggle when I would cross the street to avoid Pearl Chase, so I didn't get handed any extra projects. When Della died in 1951, I decided to take over her column for the News Press, sharing snippets from newspapers 25, 50, and 75 years in the past. And then in 1962, I started writing a full Sunday column about people, places, and events in Santa Barbara history. My granddaughter tells me I'm still famous for toting my typewriter to the News Press building to do my research. The less known aspect is that the papers were stored in the tower and it was freezing in there. I had to bundle up. Later, the papers were on microfilm and I could do my research in comfort and make copies instead of having to type notes. In the late 1950s, I took over ranch duties from my father. On Thursdays and Fridays, I supervised orange pickers, and on Saturdays, Clarence, Shirley, and I would split into 2 cars and deliver about 150 20-pound bags of oranges to people all over town. We only broke even, but at least the fruit wasn't going to waste. In 1964, the Goleta School District seized some of our land to build Foothill School. And then when my father died in 1968, I sold the rest of the ranch. It became a housing tract and a park. In fact, Tarragona Park still has part of his cactus garden, and some of the cacti went to Lotus Land. In the 1970s, I wrote a book about Fiesta, and I spent about a decade as editor of Noticias for the Historical Society. Clarence and I continued our gardening and traveled a lot and enjoyed spending time with our grandkids. Clarence was with me until 1996, when he died at the age of 94. Through all of life's changes, I continued writing my weekly column. But after 30 years and about 1,500 articles, I decided it was finally time to retire. I was 83, and my dream to become a writer had certainly come true. My other writings may become lost to time, but the olden days are still in good hands at the Gledhill Library, and I hear they're accessed regularly. It makes me so happy to hear that people are still interested in Santa Barbara history. Thank you.
And here lies Ralph Paulin.
One never knows when their time will come, and mine came early by some standards. I died at the age of 49 on September 23rd, 1935 in Santa Barbara. My beloved Clara lived to 1974, and my son Stuart died not too long after his mother in 1981. My name is Ralph Harold Paulin, and even though I was born in Ohio on December 22nd, 1886, I've always considered Santa Barbara, California, my home. One of the things I believe is that pictures speak louder than words. Now, history considers me an avocational photographer. Fine by me. All I know is some of the best times of my life have been traveling with my buddies, Horace Sexton and Captain Mortimer Rodhover, on trips to the Channel Islands. I was captivated by all of the islands, but San Miguel Island had an extraordinary fossil forest, a caliche, which is a consolidation of calcium carbonate, salt, sand, and clay. Former trees and root systems turned to caliche, forming a bizarre island landscape which I photographed in 1910. Sometimes those trips to the islands were treacherous, where the underwater conditions demanded expert knowledge of how to navigate offshore rocks. Since my trips to San Miguel Island, it has changed, and what you see now is not quite as dramatic as what I'd photographed and experienced. I made many trips to the California Channel Islands and took hundreds of photographs, turning them into stereopticon views. Stereo views, more accurately called stereographs, consists of 2 nearly identical photographs taken from separate angles, paired side by side, glued to cards mounts which were often curved. These cards were mounted into a viewer, a stereoscope, to produce the illusion of a single 3-dimensional image. Left eye and right eye views depicting the same scene appear as a single 3-dimensional image. It was all the rage in the late 1800s and early 1900s. In 1906, I married Clara Luella Jacobson at the First Methodist Church, one of the happiest days of my life. We had one son, Stuart Harold Paulin. A bit more on him later. I've always loved music. My first job was in a music store when I was 15. I played a pretty decent violin too, and enjoyed entertaining whenever I had the chance. Eventually, I played in and directed the Santa Barbara Shiat Pyramid number 34, winning a place in the musical circles of the city. Our pieces were known for their balance of beauty and merit. My orchestra won a place in the musical circles of the city. Along with photography, which I continued in the 1930s, and music, I added another career into my life. And beginning around 1914 through 1920s, I went from being a photographer to a phonograph salesman. It was a way to turn my music into a business, the Paulin Music Company. I owned what was called a talking machine store. You may know it as a record player. This turned out to be quite a successful endeavor. I was surprised to see the interest manifested in many talking machines. Invariably, the farmers wanted the best. To be prosperous and eager for the things of the world that will make their homes pleasanter. I was particularly interested to see the selections of records they made. All wanted the high-class records such as Caruso and the opera selections. We sold hundreds of records, and we believed that some of our best customers were to be developed from the rural districts. We not only made the news, but we were mentioned in the 1914 edition of the Talking Machine magazine. Of note was the fact that I remodeled our store, putting in an artistic entrance which connected the store with the piano store of the Brown Music Company. New demonstration rooms had been added and the reception room was refitted. I was proud of that mention. And following this headline, Trade Active in Southern California, here's what was said about the talking machine and myself. Despite disturbance caused by European war, demand for talking machines is greater than ever, with the higher priced goods and favor-leading houses active in way of attractive window and wareroom displays to interest public. About me specifically, it was noted, Ralph H. Paulin, manager for 15 years of the talking machine department for the Guernsey S. Brown Music Company of Santa Barbara, has recently purchased that department and has greatly increased the stock. The Paulin Music Company was located in Santa Barbara, Santa Paula, and Santa Maria. I sold the business in 1922, and when the Pacific Ready Cup Homes Company decided to expand the scope of its activities, I acquired control of the Santa Barbara branch and erected 250 homes. Artistic in design and substantially constructed, Pacific Ready Cut Homes specialized in the designing, financing, and buildings of homes. The lumber was delivered in individual pieces like any other load of materials, but the pieces were cut to the required size at the mill and notched and finished before delivery instead of having a carpenter prepare them on the job. From the start of the venture, I was successful as the head of a large business, displaying mature judgment and administrative management. Now, before I let you fine folk move on to the next story, I'd like you to get caught up with my son, Stuart, the legacy of which I am most proud. Stuart attended local schools and graduated from Santa Barbara High School. He then graduated from USC and returned to Santa Barbara to become a teacher and the head of the business administrative department at Santa Barbara High School, as well as the summer principal of 3 secondary schools. Stuart also served as administrator to set up the business education department at Dos Pueblos High School when it opened. I gather some of my business endeavors rubbed off on him. Stuart married Elizabeth Mary Davis, 1907 to 2008, and they had 2 sons, Ralph S. and Robert L. Paulin. I was a charter member of the Rotary Club of Santa Barbara and had fraternal connections with the benevolent protective orders of the Elks and the Masons. I was stable in purpose and quick in perception. I found the path of opportunity open to all who have the courage to persevere prosperity. I contributed toward the upbuilding and improvement of Santa Barbara. One never knows when their time will come, and mine came early by some standards. I'd like to leave you with this note. Follow the passions that are burning inside your heart. You might be surprised how they help your community and how what you leave behind inspires future generations. You just may be a part of something bigger, something you never thought of or had ever seen.